Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Miami Hurricanes commitment sweatshirt comes back on early Wednesday morning as former LSU and Liberty wide receiver CJ Daniels committing to the Miami Hurricanes. And this is a kid that Mario Cristobal and this staff really loved going back 12 months ago in last year's transfer portal cycle. A kid that I think, quite frankly, could have gone to the NFL after the year he had at Liberty in 2023. Now, went to LSU, probably didn't produce as much as some people expected, but you make no mistake about it, the talent, the traits, the ability to produce at a high level at the Power 4 level, there's no question mark about that. Now, what kind of wide receiver does CJ Daniels bring to Miami? It's a big bodied boundary wide receiver that can work vertically down the field. You go back to his time at Liberty in 2023, caught for over 1,000 yards, averaged nearly 20 yards per catch. This kid is exceptional when that football is in the air. You know, he's big. He knows how he's really physical at the catch point, too. He's 6'2, 200 pounds. There's just not a lot of defensive backs that have the size and physicality to go up and play the football over a guy like CJ Daniels. Now, with Isaiah Horton hitting the transfer portal, this becomes an even bigger commitment for Miami because they're trying to replace that kind of wide receiver. I'm not ready to let the ship sail on a guy like Isaiah Horton. I would love to see Miami try to work something out with him to get him back on this team in 2024 or 2025 because I think that kid's going in the right direction. And you talk about CJ Daniels and Isaiah Horton running in the same offense. I mean, those are just two bigger wide receivers that are really difficult for opposing defensive backs to deal with. I love the timing with CJ Daniels as well. As Miami gears up to, I think, make a very aggressive push for Washington State quarterback John Mateer, this is what Miami is selling. You know, there's a lot of familiarity with John Mateer going to Oklahoma, following his offensive coordinator and Ben Arbuckle. That makes all that sense on paper. One of the things that I think Miami gets the upper hand with is you can sell the talent around the quarterback position in a very similar way Miami sold Cam Ward last year. You know, why did Cam Ward come to Miami? I'm pretty convinced it was, hey, we got a good offensive line. We got some really good pass catchers. This is an offense that is ready-made for a quarterback to excel in. I think if you're Miami, you're trying to make that same kind of pitch to John Mateer where, yeah, you could go follow your offensive coordinator to Oklahoma, but Oklahoma's got some massive problems on the offensive line. They have some massive problems or question marks, you might say, at the pass catcher spot. Bringing in CJ Daniels before John Mateer, if he makes a visit to Miami, does, this could be one of those, you know, kind of cards you have up your sleeve to say, hey, this is the place for you to play your football in 2025. So not only do I love the wide receiver you're getting with CJ Daniels, I think this is a really big storyline to watch as Miami goes full court press for Washington State quarterback John Mateer. Now, I want to get into CJ Daniels. I want to talk about some other wide receivers that Miami's going after and what this wide receiver room might look like in 2025. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Miami Hurricane fans, it felt a little too quiet during the first week of the transfer portal. And Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes seem to be getting quite aggressive. Wouldn't say down the stretch because we're not down the stretch, but it is starting to ramp up for Miami. A lot of y'all been rocking with the fellas for a very long time. We appreciate y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into CJ Daniels now. Okay, so we talked about what CJ Daniels brings. And again, you go back to the Liberty film in 2023, watching that kid, breaking him down when he committed to LSU, I was like, this kid very well could have gone to the NFL draft. That's an NFL wide receiver that Miami's getting. Gives you that big body presence. And again, if you don't get Isaiah Horton back, like CJ Daniels is kind of filling those shoes. Now, what does the wide receiver room look like? I think it's massive to get a guy with the experience and proven production that CJ Daniels has, because you look at the rest of the Miami Hurricanes wide receiver room, I don't think it lacks any talent, but it is young. I mean, you have guys like JoJo Trader and guys like Nikar and guys like Ray Joseph, guys that I think are very good football players that I think are going to be ready to really contribute in 2025. But at the end of the day, it's a young pass catcher room. And so getting a guy that has all the experience and proven production that CJ Daniels brings, to me, I think is a really good fit. And it doesn't sound like Miami's done pursuing wide receivers in the portal It sounds like Eric Singleton is probably going to Auburn. Casey Concepcion, this is one that's interesting to watch. And this is one that I think is going to be kind of an NIL recruitment. You got to back it up if you want a guy like Casey Concepcion to come to your program, which Miami has shown they're willing to do, very willing to do, in fact. What I think is intriguing about this one is it never seemed like Miami was the immediate front runner for a guy like Casey Concepcion, but he's taken a lot of visits. He's gone to Alabama and he's gone to Colorado and he hasn't committed anywhere yet. And there's no real buzz where there's no real leader coming out of this recruitment. Now he's coming to Miami. I wonder if Miami can maybe take the lead there. And a guy like Casey Concepcion, and we know this kid's a hell of a football player, right? I could go over and talk about the numbers that he's produced. You go back to his true freshman year, he was the NC State offense. I mean, he led that team in receiving yards, led them in targets, led them in rushing yards. They were just trying to get the football into Casey Concepcion's hands any way they could. And when they did, good things were happening. The reason I love Casey Concepcion, one, I think he can replace some of that slot production that Strepo gave for so long at Miami. But I think, secondly, he balances out CJ Daniels really well. And more importantly, he's so easy to get involved in the offense. I mean, there's so many different things he can do and ways he can impact the football game. And this is one of those guys that you just get on your team, and it suddenly just opens up a ton of possibilities in terms of how you can attack an opposing defense. You get a guy like Casey Concepcion, get a guy like CJ Daniels, and now all of a sudden you're recruiting a guy like John Mateer and say, that it looks like a really, really intriguing spot to go play in 2025 for this Miami Hurricanes offense. Now, I think we got to talk about it. Zachariah Branch and his brother Zion Branch, who plays safety, which is a position Miami wants to address. My take on Zachariah Branch, if you, again, one of those guys that it's going to be very competitive in the NIL landscape to get him. He's definitely a guy that comes with a price tag, you might say. I'm not saying do not pursue Zachariah Branch, because this kid, from a talent perspective, it doesn't get much more exciting in terms of the speed, the movement skills, the what he can do with the football in his hands, whether it's playing wide receiver, whether it's playing special teams. Now, the thing with Zachariah Branch for me is, do you have a good plan of how you want to use him? The talent is not the question with Zachariah Branch, but as a pure wide receiver, he hasn't really found his stride. And it's important to recognize this kid is still young. He's only going into year 3 of his college football career, but he hasn't necessarily proven to be an elite pure wide receiver. He's an elite athlete. What he does with the football in his hands is special, but as a pure wide receiver, kind of what Xavier Restrepo brought you in terms of route running and sitting down in zone coverage and finding separation, having good hands, that's not Zachariah Branch's game yet. So if Miami, who's on the short list of teams that are the teams to talk about with Zachariah Branch, if you want to go out and get him, you got to make sure you have a good plan of how you want to use him and how you can develop him. And if you don't have that good plan, I think there are plenty other proven commodity wide receivers that are more ready to produce in the 2024 or 2025 season than Zachariah Branch. So this is not me getting up here and saying, don't go after Zachariah Branch, because you'll always take a kid with his kind of talent on your football team. But I am saying that you want to have a good plan before you go out and get him. And then you look at his brother Zion, a really sought after kid coming out of Bishop Gorman in 2022, has dealt with some injuries, hasn't really found his spot in the secondary. He does struggle a little bit in coverage because he's a bigger body guy. I wonder if there's a way you can find him and use him within this Miami Hurricanes offense. Again, is this me saying the Branch brothers, Miami shouldn't pursue them? No, absolutely not. It's more just make sure you have a plan in terms of how you want to use them before you go out and get them. That's probably my take. CJ Daniels, massive commitment. We'll see how it goes with Casey Concepcion. And again, I think this really helps Miami in terms of trying to attract a guy like John Mateer to this program in 2025. But at the very least, even if it's Emory Williams, you feel pretty good that the talent's going to be around the quarterback to have a successful year in the 2025 season. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.